Okay, welcome back into my morning meditation space. I'm Kelsey Sweet. I'm just sitting here laughing, thinking I should have been recording this whole time because I started this video, and then some people drove up, and I noticed they had a dog in their car, and then my dog usually loses when another dog comes by, so I just turned it off and sat here for a while waiting for them to get that out of their car, and the other dog, I don't know, whatever. The dog never came out of the car. 2 cars went down to 1 car, and then they drove off. So welcome back into this space. I started pulling cards anyway. So okay, I already started, and I'm getting ahead of myself, and then in my head I'm on one level of the direction, and then here I gotta get us caught up. So today I wanted to talk about women in my meditative space and my morning meditation. Sorry, this is still new for me. Still getting used to it. The videos. I did radio for a really long time, but a lot of my morning meditations have been centered on throat chakras. So today we're going to tell stories, and I want to talk about women because in the last couple of readings there's polarization that has come up. Polarization, 2 different ends, positive, negative, black, white, good, bad, however you want to interpret that, right? And this infinity sign, this symbol that creates an energetic current, what is present, what is current issues, current things at hand. And I've just been thinking a lot over the last few years about women, or what it means to be a woman. A lot of my thoughts and my work and the things that I do are centered on art and psychology and how those things come together. And no, I'm not an art therapist, though that requires, I don't know, I'm not going to get into that. Stay focused. Okay. I'm a lot of different things. I like having this channel space open. Okay, here it comes. And being a woman in this world at this point in time, it's a unique opportunity. It's such a blessing. As difficult as it is, I think where we're at right now with all the shifts in consciousness, everything that we're doing, right? Issues around women are becoming front and center. They're becoming the focus. And we're not quite to a global shift where there's this redirection or balancing out of harmony, however that goes, right? Because there's such a division amongst people and amongst cultures, amongst classes, and there's so many different variations and different levels of what all these things look like. And yes, we'll get into cards. So the first deck we're gonna pull from is this deck. It's MIT's version, Women of Science tarot cards, which I just think is super fascinating. And I haven't dove into every single card yet, even though I've had this deck for, I don't know, close to a year. I mean, a little less than that, maybe 6 months or so. But I get to meet a lot of different women through this, and this is, I guess, what I was doing. Okay, keep going. But I think before I pull into there, another deck that I have is this Divine Abundance, right? And Expansiveness came out in my other astrology, whatever stuff, charts, information that came through for me today. Expansiveness, expansion, emergence, coming out of my shell. All those things coming through, right? And somebody even just said it to me on my way here. I had an alignment of twos. The last, all right, no, this is like day 3. Late start days because of snow delays, because of bad weather. I mean, check out all the snow. No, it's fine. It's been a rough couple of years, and where I'm at, I mean, the weather varies, you know, like throughout the day. I think a lot of the snow is melted here, but in some of the higher elevations, the weather's still really crappy, and bus systems and whatever. So I haven't, I don't know, I feel like I'm rushing. Let's slow down. We're here, we're present. Let's not get too far ahead of the flow, because that one came up too, right? And ground and center. I don't know, I'm going to take a second and breathe. And pull one more out of this one. Sorry, I'm feeling silly this morning. Okay, story time. So I get to the store, and there's a car that drives by, and the license plate's pretty much all twos. And I was like, okay, wow, that's weird. And I go in, and then my price, or like what I had to end up paying, was also 22, right? Like if I rounded up the change to veterans, and then if I used my my own discount on hand, right, it all came to 22. I was like, oh, weird, odd, twos, and I don't know, made some other like funny comment as I hop into the store clerks, and then she mentioned something about Phoenix rising from the ashes, and I was like, oh, odd, that comes through a lot. That's been showing up a lot over the last few years, right? And this reemergence and transformation, and I mean, it's in the work that I do with art and psychology, right? My master's is in transformative leadership. I didn't get into a program into art therapy, right? Because my interests are too diverse. Right, it's true, I'm into all kinds of stuff. And I had a woman the other day message me on LinkedIn. I think it was LinkedIn, right? No, maybe it was Facebook. I mean, I do a lot of social media stuff, marketing, whatever. Anyway, it's kind of beside the point. But she said something along the, oh, are you an entrepreneur too? And it took me a minute. I have a hard time saying it out loud, right? And I had to think to myself, and I was like, oh, do I tell her? How do I say yes? Right? Surrender. So here we are. I'm just giving in. And one of my coaches said to me recently, you know, very simple, because I get into these kind of chaotic places. I'm a little all over the place. I'm sorry. I'm the weak of energy. I've had a lot of loss in my life. And so in a lot of that loss, like this said, there's a lot of true offering that is brought through loss. So I have a lot, because in losing a lot, I've also like been able to fill in all those holes and fill in all those gaps. I've always had whatever it is that I needed at every whatever point of time. Never like had anything overfloweth necessarily. But I feel like a lot of this material stuff is definitely tied into self-worth, right? And like the personhood, who am I? What is this? What is going on, right? And doing my best. Okay, so my master's is in transformative leadership, right? So in that, right, there's a lot of personal reflection, personal assessment, profiling, testing, experimenting, researching. I've been studying psychology for a while. And I'm fascinated by it, but many different levels of it, which I think is why I'm excited to get into the Women of Science tarot. Because it's not just so much psychology that I'm interested in, it's the science. But it's also the art and science, right? That's why I can't just be an art therapist, because I incorporate a lot of these other ideas, right? My degree is integral. It's integral stuff. So, I don't know. Okay, except this part, we'll move on. Let's dive into the Women in Science. Because the first one that came up, I'll clarify with each woman that I pulled in here. There are 3 women and then 2 major arcana cards that came through. And I'll do my best to go in order and then reflect on anything that comes up or that had come up in the midst of my hesitation to jump in here. Because women, okay, I guess before I get into women, some like general thoughts on women to kind of center us here, kind of like bring us to a general frame of mind, or like a reference, right? Before we dive into stuff, just kind of so we're on the same page. Because again, right, women are very divided into these different groups. We can thank the patriarchy for that if we want to go into that. We can get divisive, we can be battling if we want, but in the last reading, right, if there's this cocooning stage that is happening, there's other points in here that'll come up, so I'm gonna at some point the caterpillar has to surrender, right? It has to like give in to the idea that it's transforming and that it's growing. And from a person who is into the woo-woo artistic esoteric stuff, but is also trained in empirical behavioral science, like empirical behavioral research, where's the data, show me the data. I'm pretty good at being as objective as I possibly can, and then discerning and pulling out my own emotional stuff. And I found ways of compartmentalizing those different energies in my life. And over the last couple of years, my focus hasn't been so much on the artistic side of it, so much as it's been on the reality based, the science based, right? The evidence based aspects of who I am, and looking for that objective feedback as a reflection to what's going on in the world, because you can't change other people and you can't change the world, and all you can change is yourself, right? Through this whatever, I don't know. Side note, for like personality profiling and all that, I tested as an INFJ for, I don't know, well over a good 10-year period, if not longer. So I started taking psych classes in high school, right? INFJ early on in college, and then even at the beginning of graduate school. INFJ all the way through. My graduate school programs in transformative leadership, I go through this program, and then a couple of years later, after having a kid, going through another like physical female transformative process, diving back into the transformative studies from a PhD level, and then testing at the very beginning of that to find out I'm an INFP, or I tested INFP, right? It blew my mind. That on top of a couple other basic questions, just on top of just what I'm experiencing from the reality of the system and the limitations, right? Because there's what we want in life, and there's what we strive for. There's our ideal self, and then there's our highest self, and then there's like our superficial self, and then there's the perceived self, and then there's all these different selves, right? And if you get too far into the self, right, and all you do is talk about yourself, then what do people talk about within these modern psychologies that say, yo, you can't talk about yourself, but you do all the, there's a lot of semantics, right, that confuse a lot of languages and a lot of dialogue. So when we get to our feelings, words confuse feelings because feelings in literal things mean different things, and then science terms are adapted and kind of adapted into more mainstream pools, or like cakes, right? And they're I don't know. Every cake is different. Every cake is baked different. There's other ingredients. I don't know. Somebody might be cookies, whatever. It's the seasons. 'Tis the seasons, right? There's a point. But if we have all of these different flavors, all of these different perspectives, all of these, okay, right, what's the point? It's the Tower of Babel. We get through all these whatever. And so if we're trying to make a point across these various different levels, but we're trying to cross cultures, right, we have to extend past words. So we get into things like art or archetypes, which are tarot cards, that play into these minor subconscious psyche type things, right? To find new ways of communicating. There's points. This is going to be interesting reading back or listening back through. It's fine. But if you have, okay, so women, right? What's the problem with women? There are a lot of problems with women. There's a lot of toxic aspects to women. There are a lot of, like, people who are men, right? They're, oh, women don't want to talk about the toxic whatever, blah, blah, blah. And then we just get into the pointing fingers and we get into the battling mode, but we can't fight the system that exists. We have to do something creative. We have to do something that's new and something that's co-creative, which means working together. And it's hard for women, especially, I can't really speak for men. I'm not a man. But as a woman, or as a white woman, right, what I have noticed from my own perspective up here on my little, like, snowy hilltop in the desert, you know, little mountain hermit, whatever you want to call me. Because of things like the patriarchy or all these other political histories, right? Because of things like racism, because of things like classism, because of just general douchebaggery and power structures, right? Certain ways of thinking, linear ways of thinking. I don't know, women don't work together very well. And they should, but it's hard, and it's just like, well, how do we do that, and how do we acknowledge all of these things, and how do we get past a lot of these blocks and barriers? And it's tricky because as women, we all have different experiences of what it means to be a woman based off our culture and our heritage and what we have and what it is that we're given, God-given, or whether our family has given it to us inheritance-wise, or luck, or keeping the darker entities at bay, not skin color, but right, like evil entities at bay. There are manipulative forces that play into that, but I don't want to get into these extreme levels of judgment where, again, with the polarizing thing, I want to try to stay as, like, current and middle grounded as I can. So if it's not super specific or clear, maybe there's a point to it so you can bring your own point forward. And then I like feedback and dialogue. I don't know. Anyway, I have a lot of thoughts. So let's, whatever. Okay. let's get to the women pictured here. And representation, I think, is fairly fair across the board. MIT put this together, so I mean, already we're under the umbrella of academia, limiting a certain perspective, but women breaking through this, I think, is interesting, and the women that came through this also, I think, are interesting, because I think it ties all this other stuff together. Just justifying and kind of avoiding doing the work, my own inner work. Coffee this morning. Okay, these guys I pulled out. Ladies, these guys, these ladies, these gals, these people. Let's get to it already. Okay. Grace Hopper is the first one that came out. A computer scientist. So, computers, new technologies, top 10, full 10, just numbers, things for you to think on for a moment. Spit out my gum, I apologize. The symbols on this one are a little bit different. So this is a nanoparticle. Emotions, intuition, water, nano. 10, according to MIT, completing a cycle, ready to start again. Grace Hopper, that's the way it's lined out, I'll read it to you. And I'll show you her face instead of mine while I read it. Communicate clearly with everyone around you. Please don't judge my nails. Or anything else. I'm showing up. I'm not looking for perfection. I'm just showing up. And because if I wait any longer to do it, and if I wait for all the other pieces to come into play, they're just not gonna show up, right? So, in being a creative and doing entrepreneurial type work, it's funny because there's women sitting in the car next to me and they're doing makeup in their car. I love women. Women are fun. Women can be very creative. Okay, so communicate clearly. Computer programming pioneer Grace Hopper believed that anyone could be a programmer if the computer spoke their language, right? Again, to language, communication, symbols, archetypes, so on and so forth. There are symbols and archetypes in computer programming as well, ones, zeros. We get into binary components or building things on a technological level that are related to building things on a conscious level or an artistic level as well. It's kind of the same process, right? Okay. No, I'm not sorry. There's nothing to be sorry for. I'm just silly. This lady over here next to me. You can feel people watching, right? Okay, get out of my bubble. That's fine. Her invention of the first compiler made coding more accessible. She advocated creating programming languages that worked on any computer, regardless of the manufacturer. And this led to the development of one of the first high-level languages, COBOL. Hopper received more than 40 honorary degrees and even had a U.S. Navy destroyer named in her honor. Right? Interesting. The second ship to be named after a woman. Following her death in 1992, she was interred with full military honors at Arlington National Cemetery and was posthumously awarded the Presidential Medal of Freedom. So, one of the first things that came to mind as I got into this deck, right, was freedom and women, right, and where we're going and trying to free ourselves in the world. Because if you're a woman, you know you can't just travel anywhere you want around the world. You're not free to be safe in your own skin, expressing yourself as you are creatively, no matter who you are, especially if you cross different cultural barriers. There's a lot of safety issues that come into play, especially in countries outside of America. Some of them, I don't know, I'm not going to get into all the political specifics and bring all that in. I don't want to make this like a debate in any sort of a way. The card that jumped out diving down the side of the car here is Justice. So Justice comes through. Justice came through the last couple of readings too, and what is justice and finding in the balance in this harmonious balance, in the state of neutrality. We're looking for neutralizing versus homogenizing. We're not trying to eliminate or take out anything so much as we're trying to cleanse ourselves through food and clean water. For clarity, right? Clarity came through in this, and clear communication, because if you're consuming information as well, even if it comes down to news and politics, or if you're absorbing other people's energies or intentions, especially through readings or in listening to a lot of other readers and how they do tarot card readings over the last couple of years on the YouTube channels. I don't want to repeat. There are a lot of themes and points made to it. Okay, we're gonna close that one off. That's good, because I feel like there are definitely some good readers out there who do have clear channels, who do a lot of work for clarifying DNA on a genetic level. It goes deeper, right? This is where we're getting into the science of it, which is fun, because after I'm gonna put Justice in my lap. There we go. The second one that came up, Alice Augusta Ball, a chemist. Neat. So in this deck, when we're looking at our symbols up here, this is micro, right? So looking at the fine details, creativity, passion, fire. 4, as they put it in here, stability, structures, birthing something new, which is great, because then we're talking about women, or the feminine, right? Because people are very particular about the semantics, because we are recognizing as a collective that words are things, are powerful, and this is storytelling, right? So the words we use and the stories we tell ourselves, especially about other people and our history as a individual and as a collective, it tells a lot. So Alice, sometimes you must force oil to mix with water to create a solution. I love this. Because I feel like on so many different levels here, it's exactly what we're doing. What is it? Emulsifying? Is that the word that I'm thinking of? Because you can, if you think of like the early kindergarten experiments or whatever. You put oil and water in the bottle and then you shake them up and then you see the division, right? Then you get into this idea that the two are separate or different, and then they can't mix, or they can't cohabitate, or they can't I don't know why coagulate is coming to mind, but coagulate or like clot like blood, or scab. We all do that. We're all human. I mean, even animals will do the same thing, right? Instead of bleeding out, we're not going to just bleed out all over the place. We're not going to spill blood. It's not battle. It's not war. We're not fighting, right? We're healing. So if we're healing, we got to be like we got to put the scab on it. And they're like some of the most fascinating things on our bodies, right? Our bodies do interesting things when they heal. On one hand, it can be disgusting, but if you get into like, that's conditioning. That's just because whatever, or like you're taught that. There's a fascination with wounding. Maybe from a masculine level, the fascination is in creating the wound and the penetration, right? And then in the female aspect, it's in the birthing, right? This is birthing something new. You're pushing something out. There's blood and whatnot, right? But it's a emergence. It's a coming out of sorts. It's a breaking free. It's a breaking through. It's freedom. Freedom from a womb. Freedom from a cocoon. You're no longer a seed, right? Growing inside of a womb. Alice Augusta Ball. Blessed with a surplus of dedication and diligence, Alice was one of the first African American and the first woman to earn a master's degree at the University of Hawaii. Right? Which is cool that it's in Hawaii, because again, if we're talking about women in different cultures and different levels of integration and understanding, there's a broader knowledge, no, there's a integral perspective of it, but new, unique, right? Allowed. The perseverance drove the young chemist to develop the first effective treatment for leprosy. So what I like about her too is, especially in this card, there's not only there's the word broader again. I just don't want to get into stupid puns because I like words and stuff like that. Right? And again, in like trying to be careful with words. Like, you can't use words like whiter with women either, right? And if you stack on something like she's pointing out leprosy, then you're talking about people with disabilities or people with illnesses, disabilities, right? But disabilities don't necessarily limit the imagination, right? There's a an open umbrella that can contain what that means within a system. Okay. Let's see. Okay, so back up. The perseverance drove the young chemist to develop the first effective treatment for leprosy, deriving it from the oil of the cholamugra seed. I'm sorry if I ruined that. Her treatment would go on to be the standard care for leprosy for the next 30 years. Ball passed away before she could see the full impact of her discovery, but the world became a healthier place thanks to her efforts. One thing to point out about both of these two women so far is recognition for their work was given after they died, not within their lifetime, which is interesting to note, because if we're progressing and we're moving along in these lines, giving current recognition where it is deserved in this time and space, especially with women to women, having genuine interactions of compliments, complimentary. What I like, especially, okay, so I'm an artist, so a lot of my words relate to the lingo or the jargon that goes into artwork. So if we're talking about a color wheel, then we're talking about, okay, again, a wheel, but opposite colors on a color wheel, right? If they're polarized, whether it's red and blue or so on and so forth, they're not, you don't call, if they're opposite on the color wheels, you don't call them opposite colors, they're complementary colors, right? So it's like the mixing of the oil and the water thing again, because the rule is with art, if you mix any two complementary colors, especially if it's like a green and orange, if they're secondary colors versus primary colors, primary, secondary, tertiary colors, right? If you're mixing complementary secondary colors, you get brown. If you blend them all, then you get like a gray, mushy, whatever. But if you put the two colors next to each other, no matter which complements they are, they're called complementary colors because they complement each other. They help each other stand out. They work together to create vibration, to create emotion, to create stimulation, which in the realm of science, if we're talking about neuroscience, I'm into neuroscience. My background is in neuroaesthetics and consciousness as well. So we're talking about action potentials within the brain. I should do a video about it at some point, because I talk about this in classes a lot and with students, and if I just did a video, then I can just not have to talk about it all the time, because it gets kind of complicated. It takes up a lot of time. But they complement each other. If you mix them, you can mix them to get brown. If you're mixing complementary primary colors together, then you get secondary colors, right? If you're mixing a primary into secondary complementary, you can get a tertiary color. You can get more diversity, right? If you're integrating and mixing and blending these things, or if you are creating an image or a picture for the world, right? If you're trying to paint a picture for somebody with your words, or for co-creating the reality that we live in with the words and with our consciousness, right, then you can juxtapose complementary colors, or you can juxtapose color in such a way that it will elicit a biological response, one that is somewhat predictable, right? So you see how complex with our programming, back to our computer programmer here, right? If we're programming ourselves through our genetic coding, our DNA code is a program, right, that creates a sequence, a chain of events on a cellular level, right, that helps to shape the world around us, that is driven perhaps by something that is called consciousness or spirituality, or whatever we want to call that, right? Let's bring in our third one, because before I go too deep and eat up all this time, I'm sorry I lose track of time through some of these. I'm going to try to not make it too long. like I said, I did radio, so I talked for 2 hours, like really early in the morning, so I can talk for a really long time. I'll do my best to be clear and succinct as I can. But like I said, I got a lot to talk about. There's been a lot on my mind, a lot. I'm gonna let some of that sink in for a minute. Maybe, I'm gonna come back to this Divine Abundance card thing for a minute and take kind of like a breath, and then we'll introduce our third scientist into this mix. Just because I kind of gotta like, okay. Hi, we're bringing in a lot of information again. Freedom, right? Freedom, freedom of speech, freedom of throat chakra communication. I don't know, I feel like somebody kind of flew out there. Maybe it was that one. Invite help. Yeah, good idea. I want to call in some more guides. Kind of assist me through the end of this, because okay, we'll trust. We're gonna go with the process and trust, because we're butterflies emerging out of this process, right? This is excuse me, moving some energy through. Yep, we're just gonna clear some of that. I'm just gonna clear a little bit more real quick. Sometimes I've got my Palo Santo in my pocket, but it looks like I left my smudging tools at home. That's fine. Okay. We'll bring in our third one. Rosalind Sussman Yalo, a medical physicist, 8, also in these fine details, in these little micro details. This is why I'm kind of refocusing and recentering myself at the moment, because if I get too into the details, we're gonna be here for a really long time. I don't need to do that to anybody. I don't need to do that to myself. I got stuff to do today. We still have a couple more cards to go. All right. Also in micro, which again is creativity, passion, and fire. Fire came through last time fire came through basically my greater backyard. A lot over the last 2 summers. There's just been so much smoke, and just like months of it, like 2 summers in a row where there's just been like 2.5, like a 2-3 months of just like smoke and ash, and it's just surreal because it's a pandemic. The like world has been shut down, like. And here I am just kind of in my little bubble, and I've always just been kind of in this like space. I feel like my whole life has been waiting for this to happen. Like, I knew it. I knew it'd all come crashing down. There's a reason why sometimes in life we go through some of these darker processes where we have to understand I don't know, it's like birth. Birth is painful. Just the whole process. I mean, even imagine from like a virgin perspective, intercourse isn't always great or pleasant. I mean, it can be incredibly painful. And then you go through this 9-month, whatever, on average process where all your organs and insides and hormones, your entire component of whatever is just like being rocked. Everything's shifting around and moving and creating another life. You have another thing feeding inside of you. It's a bizarre whatever. And then you go through the pains of the contractions of pushing it out. And if it's a healthy birth or an easy birth, I mean, all births aren't the same. Women in this process are so vulnerable, which is why it's so important that men honor and protect that female, because it's the giving of new life. It's new birthing in this situation. It's not a weakness. That vulnerability isn't a weakness. It's one of the greatest strengths. But if it's not honored and protected, all is lost. The mother is lost, and you can die in that process. The baby can die in that process. It's not a, like, la-di-da, like... Alright, Rosalind, I'm gonna stop yapping. Okay. 8, reflecting on lessons learned. If anything that's going on here, I'm reflecting a lot on my life and just the lessons that I've learned. And reflecting out loud, because when you say it out loud and when you review it back to yourself from different points in time, different states of mind, different emotional states, you get different information every time, right? You get feedback and you can see yourself. And if you can mirror yourself back to yourself and you can look at yourself objectively enough, you know where you can make radical growths, changes, transformations. You learn how to transform. If you know what you were, you know what you can become. But it's hard to know what you can become if you don't know what you were, right? But if you want to become something new and something great and of this higher thing, there has to be some sort of recognition in there that you're not necessarily the best or your best self, or I don't know, there's always room to grow and evolve. You're not evolving. If you're not evolving, then you're devolving, right? So Rosalind here, she tells us even the tiniest details are important. So I'm giving them to you, as tiny as they may seem. They're important to somebody somewhere. She won the Nobel Prize in Physiology or Medicine for her development of the radioimmunoassay, and essential medical breakthrough that allowed the precise measurement of substances, such as hormones in the blood. Oh, there it is again, hormones, blood, right? Female hormones are very complex. Our blood, especially in the way we relate to blood, is very different than that of men, right? Men go for blood, it's like death. I mean, this is masculine. I'm sorry if I'm overgeneralizing or offending anybody through all this. I don't mean to. It's not my intention. Right? And then females go through like a cleansing of blood every month, where it's just like self-inflicted pain, or the body just responds in this way that's just, it does what it does. It's it could be a more sacred experience for all if the system at large were designed in such a way that women could thrive and still be able to relate to their bodies and make decisions for their own bodies, because that's one thing like we all don't really have in common here. We can't really make decisions for our bodies. And one of the especially like women during this time, or the women that are represented in here, one thing that stands out to me is here in America, women weren't allowed to wear pants to work until the 70s, until the 1970s or something like that. Like, you're gonna control the way that we dress all the way up until the 70s? I mean, it's still even controlled in schools now. I saw something, where some boys went to school with midriff showing and whatever, basically wearing clothes that would be inappropriate for a girl. They didn't get in trouble. Nothing was said to them, right? Because women's bodies are sexualized. They're objectified. They're put into these boxes, right? We're put in boxes and put on shelves and then sold as commodities to what? So we can be bought and purchased to be bred, or it's gross what some people do to other people. Alright, okay. We're gonna save some of those details for another project. I'm not gonna go there. I don't. No. Okay, where are we? Medical physicist Rosalind, where'd you go? Had been researching diabetes, which required an accurate measurement of blood insulin levels. This inspired Yalo and her collaborator, Dr. Solomon Burson, to invent the revolutionary radioimmunoassay, which combines immunology and radioisotope tracing to easily quantify the amount of trace molecules in the body. So again, we're looking for to quantify means we're making things objective, looking at what we can measure. And these are also behavioral terms, right? Because we're looking for measurable behavior. Show me the evidence and the details, right? Show me where a lot of this pseudo-scientific stuff works or doesn't work. One thing that we've learned in exploring ourselves and in diving into our bodies is that we have these quarks. Quirks too, but quarks, right? Like if we look down to the cells and we look beyond the cells and we look to these atoms and electrons and we look beyond that and we get even like deeper. We go into like the tiny molecules, or like the molecular components, or the fine details of the fine details of the fine details of the fine details, and we begin to enlist the imagery of this kaleidoscope, of this infinity of ever expanding and ever knowing. And one of the properties of quarks, if we're talking about metaphysics and science, right, one of the properties is anticolor. I don't know a whole lot about it. I'm not super well versed in all of this stuff. I don't have a whole lot of certain resources. I know we're given the lives we're given and the tools that we're given. So from my understanding, right, we have these properties called anticolor. And for whatever reason, if we're talking about consciousness and these fine details down here in these like itty-bitty components, and then we're looking to the expansive nature, right, or something that could be polar opposite of a quark, then we're looking at a field of morphic resonance in which these teeny tiny particles of quarks, of these like anti-sparky whatever's happening in here, right, affecting things on this cosmic level, on such a, there's that word again, a broad range. Maybe we'll make the broad coined version for the future more positive, or something more enlightening. If you're going to be abroad, then you're broadening the horizons for your fellow humans. Welcome to the Human Academy. If you go onto my website, kelseysweet.com, you'll find more about some of my projects. One of them is that I do a number of different things, and I like this tarot space, and this kind of etheric creative space, because we can integrate. We can meet on all the different intersections, and we can get through all the different interstices. We can be as creative and expressive as we want, and open to channeling in these newer ideas or concepts, right? Because if we're channeling, what is it we're tapping into? Maybe it's a broad term, like a third, fourth, fifth, sixth dimension, some other, or like a higher self. If it's a scientific term, that could be equivalent to it. Maybe it's tapping into this realm of morphic resonance, or where this energetic concept for ideas exists, where we can tap into this field and have similar ideas no matter how far apart we are, how intertwined we are, whether or not we know each other, like the butterfly effect, right? There's all these super fine details that can help to explain what the human experience it is, and what it means to be conscious, and what it means to be an artist or creative, and the philosophy. But we're trying to simplify, right? For justice. And I like in this deck that it's not the scales. That we have this Ouroboros, right? Or again, like this vortex. In the cosmos, we have this infinitude of creation and possibility, and within creation is an aspect of destruction. So we can't demonize the masculine side, right? We can put the toxic demons, negativity, we can put all that stuff into a container and recognize that it's a level of thinking perhaps created through words, or just like a mucking up of languages, or a dirtying of languages. Like dirty words come to mind, like the evolution of language, or the evolution of words, and how they're brought into society, and how they come into current meaning, and what the current meaning versus the history of a word, how those two differences help to shape or mold kind of what that concept would mean for the future. And the word not like narcissist comes up, because narcissism and its polar empathetic opposite, or its polar opposite, the empath, right, are two terms that come from, say, a psychological field that have very precise meanings, and then have been adapted to fit the cultures of things like spirituality, or just kind of like, I don't know. So they take on an emergence of meaning. But narcissist comes to mind because it's story time. It has a story for a history. It comes from a flower. It's the story of Narcissus, right? Of a man who comes along, then he has his own image, and then he reflects in the water. And I don't know what it is with this, like, male story of a reflection in water and seeing either yourself back, or like the man with or like the dog with the stake, that parable as well. These material concepts that we hold on to, right? But there's the Salvador Dali has a painting as well, The Metamorphosis of Narcissus, which I think is why this is coming to mind as well. And it's such a kind of a macabre, or like almost dark, but very charged image as far as symbolism. If you look it up, if you can find it, because it takes on the story, and it takes on its contemporary version of this idea, and perhaps because the surrealist components have been a recent influence to how we create or how we make art now, right? everything's such a spectrum. None of it really matters. I mean, because if you can look beyond, again, like, if you could look beyond, like, the broad thing or kind of like the end goal, if you can whatever, and look at these kind of minute details within the current, then you start getting into present-minded stuff, mindfulness. Then you start, like, or at least kind of what I'm finding where my head is going now. There's a dissociation, I think, that happens when you start diving into thoughts and philosophy and the self and who you are, and you begin to look at the world around you and you just see it, and you see the awe and the wonder and the colors and the beauty, and dissociate from the language, right? The words no longer carry the same influence, right? It begins to take on a new meaning. Everything around you begins to take on a new meaning. The way you relate to things, it just... When we place labels on people, especially others, right? Or like in our communication, it's difficult for our society really to... Our society, maybe like... I can speak to only the society, which I reflect however you want to take that. I can't speak for everybody. It's this reflection on lessons learned, right? Where am I at? I'm at an hour for time. Okay, I'll start wrapping it up. That's probably why things are starting to kind of settle and the channels are starting to kind of... We'll have to carry this on another time and kind of dive into some of it a little bit more. Justice came out. What was the other one? Oh, Strength. Yes. Strength. Here I've been staring at it kind of like this whole time, and I really haven't talked about it a whole lot. But it came out in the last readings as well, and it comes out in these usually, like, Strength, there's the lion, right? The lioness, or like I don't know, the gold lion thing keeps coming up for me. I'm gonna have to let that one sift through a little bit. But strength and hard work and industry, creating new industry, revolution. A technological revolution, maybe how it all ties together. If we started out with computer science and we're in this new age of technology, and there's like the industrial revolution, if we're going into a new time period, right, then we're going into this revolution in technology from an industry level. Not industrial so much, but from the industry, and that's where a lot of my work has been within the arts, is doing work in the industry. Then music, performance, theater, and like working with people who put on shows. I do community, creative, conscious, whatever cultivation stuff. So I'm very observant of how these different forms of expression are coming together to create culture for the future. And what I would like to do within this space is like inject or infuse the current with an idea of consciousness, or this idea of consciousness, or to get people to do the deep reflection, right? Because if we're self-reflecting and doing the inner work and going through this, you can get caught up on the superficial aspect of the reflection, where you get into the looks or whatever. I don't know. I'm an only child of a single mom, so I've spent a lot of time alone by myself. Especially as a kid, and when I was going through different things, difficult things or whatever, I didn't have anybody to talk to, I had to be accountable for myself and for my own actions and for my thoughts and processing a lot of it. And there's times in my life where I've dissociated from my body and then having to get back to earth and come back to earth, or finding these contemplative places. There's like mirror meditations you can do, whether it's through yoga or there's other practices. I'm not an advocate for witchcraft, but I know that mirrors are used for these other esoteric purposes, or again, they're tied to stories and histories, or like dark, scary things too. I always screw up the word. Superstitions, right? There's a lot of superstition within mirror. We can get like into some of that too, right? But if you can look in and beyond and through that, you can find something deeper. And like there's been a couple times in my life where I forget I'm around other people and I just kind of get lost in my own little world and get lost in my own meditations and reflections, right? You know, self-reflecting, reflecting on life, just existence. I don't know. I'm a pretty smart gal. So there's a lot that I think about. I'm a creative and innovative person, so I just have a lot of things constantly going through my mind, right? There's been times in my life where I've been like looking at myself in a mirror and somebody would be like, "Oh, why are you looking at yourself? You just think you're whatever." And you're like, you can't care what people think. And it's hard with words to be precise enough, especially with boundaries and energetic boundaries, because you have to know yourself well enough so that as you dive in, or that you go deep into this, or as you go deep into yourself and these reflections, right, that you can come back up out of that, and you can pull yourself back up out of the deep and out of the depths. Because a lot of people get lost in the depths. They start inner reflecting or going through these difficult things, especially if difficult things have happened to them, and a lot of people end up conquering themselves or taking their own lives. So this deep inner reflection can get very chaotic. You know, it's the phoenix rising out of the ashes, going into the dark, you know, having to burn through an aspect of self and knowing, and having to like get a real good freaking look at yourself and who you are, to know what to change, to know what to eliminate, or just to fully release all of it, and then submit to the process of being born new into something else, and just giving over and giving into it. I'm going to read into the strength and justice cards a bit here, just for the sake of it, and then I'll close off the channel. So strength, number 8, right? Strength, 8, this infinity symbol, ongoing. Infinity energy is always ongoing, right? There's all these different levels that we can't even fathom or begin to understand with our tiny little puny human brain. So why we limit ourselves to these structures and these systems? We're trying to label people and put people into these boxes is just freaking beyond me, because it does nothing except for close off communication and relationship. You know, it's fear-based, especially if you're on guard and you're projecting, and like the funniest ones are the ones that are projecting, that are saying that, "Oh, no, I'm not projecting, you're projecting," or again, like all of these like psychology terms being used by people who are not psychology professionals in ways that are not quite aligned with what, I don't know, there's just like a discord, if you would. So reversed, if this comes up reversed, hedonism, self-doubt, lack of courage, lack of self-control, vanity, again, that superficial aspect, playing in the dark, going through the ego, the I, me, mine, that's the masculine Piscean age that we're coming out of as we're going into the feminine Aquarian age, right? That difference. So for shifting into an upright, if we're going into the opposite direction, we're talking about potency, vitality, confidence, self-belief, enjoying power. That, like, confidence versus narcissistic thing. Like, I know for me, it's taken me a really long time, I mean, even still, to, like, be confident, and as a woman, know how to express self-confidence, because if you don't play this meek, meager, whatever little thing, or play up the, like, the power little princess, whatever, especially if you're, like, hot, like, if you don't meet these expectations, I mean, man, people are harsh. They're crude, and they're cruel, and they're just like, oh, they don't understand how they're supposed to be responding back, because they're met with a lot of these, their own self-limiting beliefs, right? Where they just don't want to dive in or meet somebody down at the depths of where they are. There's like a tug-of-war. This isn't tug-of-war. I'm not playing tug-of-war. I don't play tug-of-war. I'm not gonna battle this out. You can't battle a current system and expect that you're gonna come in and then, like, defeat it. That's not how this is gonna work. It's not how it's gonna play out. It's co-creative. You have to create something else, you know. You just be the little butterfly cells and you do butterfly things over here, you know, and then eventually, as things begin to balance out, you know, things over here will adapt, and so on and so forth. It's evolution. It's taking steps up and steps forward, not steps backward. You know, you don't get to come into somebody's space and then when they're feeling good about them, go whoosh, and then whack and then pull them down to make you feel good. It's that homogenizing aspect, you know. I see that a lot, like, with white people especially. They have a really hard time seeing other people be happy and going through all of, like, this stuff. There's, like, a yes and no, or, like, if you don't fit the positive, whatever, because, I don't know, even the words there are all twisted, because we start to get into, like, the toxic positivity stuff, you know, or these people who are so devout into spiritualism and the, like, the practices, and who do all, like, the work and the whatever over here, but who don't embrace the shadow side or the more complicated aspects, who don't dive in. And if they see somebody working through the dark stuff and going through some heavier, or they see some of the more, like, morbid aspects of it, that's demonized. When that is not what should be demonized. The demons are the demons, and, like, if you're trained to see the demons, you'll see the demons, but what the demons do are disguise themselves. They hide. They're hard to find. They're not gonna just jump out and be obvious to you. They're gonna play against the psyche and to, like, twist in, you know. Then we get into the different stories and we get into the different parables that go into human potentials, right? That's why stories exist and why we have different religions that use these stories to teach through experience, because humans are relatively predictable, right? The Strength card represents calm, deliberate power and the gradual, patient triumph over circumstance. Traditionally depicted as a gentle woman calmly taming a lion, our Strength shows a female worker resting after stoking the furnace of a steam engine. Mastering fire and other natural forces allowed us to amplify our strength, build increasingly complex tools. Where did it go? I'm just gonna put it up. I don't know where it went. And set out on a path that eventually led to the Industrial Revolution. The consequences were not all positive, as we can see from the polluted sky, and the polluted water, and the polluted air, and the polluted ground, and everything's polluted. The polluted bodies, the polluted animals. We are still learning how to use our newly gained powers without harming ourselves in the process. Because again, that's part of it. People don't want to dive in and then take accountability and do the work. Maybe that's what comes up for this Justice card. right? They want to put that emotional labor, they want to hold somebody else accountable for doing it, and then be in this place of passivity, or I just think in that childlike mode where you're waiting for a mother to come along, or waiting for somebody else to come along and fix it and do it for you. You know, you're waiting for a dad to come along and fix it and do it for you, right? Grew up with a single mom. I didn't have other people to come and do these things for me. I started staying home alone when I was 8. You know, I've had to be responsible for myself and others, and you know, like nieces, nephews, other animals. I've had chores, I've had duties, I've had responsibilities. But there's a difference between responsibility and accountability, and I've talked about that in other different platforms and a couple of like radio interviews, and talk about it again at some point or another, right? Maybe we'll just talk about it a little bit now. Then maybe, or where did I see it? I don't know, probably came through something else, huh? Oh yeah, here. Okay, so if it's justice, if it's reversed, right? If we're the disempowered aspect, lack of accountability, unfair treatment, dishonesty, flaws, imbalance. Upright, fairness, justice, cause and effect, balance, equilibrium. They put responsibility. Responsibility is part of it. But again, accountability. So you can take accountability for something you're not necessarily responsible for. Right? You can take accountability for yourself and for your future actions. Say in the instant something horrible happens or whatever, but you don't necessarily have to take responsibility for somebody else's actions. Again, you're not doing the emotional labor for somebody else. If somebody comes in and there's a perceived threat versus an actual threat, that's where it gets really tricky, because our brains are stupid. Our brains can't discern something imagined versus something that happened. It can't really distinguish between the two. So getting to this objective space where you can be just and have that, it's very difficult. You have to really not just love yourself, but accept yourself, the radical acceptance, right? Accepting all the flaws and noticing the perfections and the imperfections. A space of non-judgment. It's justice, but it's not judgment, right? Perhaps judgments have to be made, or a judgment has to be made based on judgments that were made, or like a conglomeration of judgments were made, so we have to make a judgment about that, or we have a judge who makes an ultimate judgment about other people's judgments, and at some point or another, when everybody can somewhat be on the same page, we're supposed to call that justice. So the justice card signals the restoration of balance and fairness. Usually restoration I like, because it's a forward-moving process. It's not destructive. We're not destroying or taking away. It's restoring. Normally, through a restoration, right, it's not pretty. If you're restoring an old home, it's not glamorous. There's dust everywhere. There's tape. There's brooms. There's nails. You gotta watch out. Somebody left staples out, you know? Like, you don't want to walk around barefoot. You have to have protection. You gotta wear, like, the appropriate protection. You know, if you're not protected and you go into a space, or you try to do something prematurely, especially in relationships, if you try to get into a relationship prematurely, there's not going to be justice. It's going to be out of balance, because justice here is the conservation of energy. Energy doesn't just disappear and go anywhere, and you don't want to drain energy on somebody. You don't want to take from anybody's energy, right? You want to conserve your own energy as much as you can, because energy is coming in and energy is going out all the time. So consciousness is a way of directing just that general energy, down to the quarks. This fundamental concept of physics states that the total amount of energy in an isolated system remains constant. Stars and galaxies are continuously being formed from the remains of dead stars. Atoms rearrange themselves in new forms, and life often feeds on other life, but energy cannot be created or destroyed. The conservation of energy is a symbol of the fundamental justice and balance of our universe. We are stardust. Things are as they are. You have to radically accept that, this is how it is. And if we want to create a better future, right, we can't get caught into the injustices and the pointing the fingers and going backwards and looking at all these other things or whatever. It's just not gonna work that way. This is what we're talking about here. There's an aspect of isolation where you have to cleanse and purify and clean and get to a point of clear communication and non-bias and non-judgment, I suppose. Right? We're not necessarily alone in the world, so you can't get away from people fully, but to be conscientious of the people that you're around and your environment and what you're taking in and what you're consuming, you can get in this place of restoration. And it's healing, right? And if you can restore your energy and get to your restored vitality, or a place where you can be consciously engaged with others and know yourself and your boundaries well enough where you're not depleting or taking from others, or overgiving to others too, because overgiving can look like a lot of things, like the doormats, or the people who just don't give a damn, or the people, it's Christmas time, right? So there are people who, this doesn't just happen at Christmas, I just saw something about this or whatever in a comment feed or posted or whatever, just scrolling through social media, right? It's something I see most years pop up somewhere along the line, right? Where people who give expecting something else in return, and I think in this society that's where we get messed up the most, because we give expecting something in return, right? There's all these people who are entitled, or I did this, so therefore I should get that. We have a lot of these toddler mentalities of people where if they don't get what they want, or if things don't turn out their way, or if there's no compromise, right, or if it has to be my way or the highway, you get somebody who has, on behavioral terms, what we call an extinction burst, or you have somebody who throws a tantrum, or in some cases, I see this a lot, where men who are told no or whatever to a woman, or from a woman, by a woman, they become violent in some form or another. There's this exchange, and I can attest to that. I mean, that's happened to me twice in the last couple of months, just where I've said no to a man, right, and then it's met with the really? I don't have to give of myself, and because I'm not giving of my energy and I'm not showing up in all these other ways that women have been expected to show up before, it doesn't mean that I'm a bad person or that there's any sort of a thing, right? That's where a lot of the strength has to come into play. It's hard work. This is pictured here. This is a black woman working in a white man's world, assimilating into this culture, or I like the idea of perhaps the butterfly coming into the caterpillar cocoon area, right? Invading in such a way that is not ego. It's not an ego invasion. I mean, this is the invasion of a human transformation, and this is the future of humanity. This is diversity. This is greater this is greater than our potential. This is our highest self. This is the energetic current as it exists now. It's not something that could happen or might happen or whatever. It's what is happening now. We have all this energy now, and the knowledge now, and the tools now, and the skills now, right? It's just like, no matter what side of the pole we want to put ourselves on, if any side at all, right? We have to recognize that we're collectively like oil and water. And it's not that we have to exist separated. You can blend the two and you can mix them. And then you can add other agents and other catalysts into this mix. And you can get all kinds of things. You can get an array. I mean, just look at the life around us and what the world is and what it means. Okay, one out here and I'm closing down, I promise. Hour and a half. Extraordinary, darling, extraordinary. Like the peacock. A peacock, again, is the phoenix rising from the ashes. Another metaphor similar coming through, but this one's not for you. Let's take, that one is for you. You are extraordinary, but, oh, you have to accept it. Life is extraordinary. Yeah, we're gonna end here. Because this is what I want, what I am, what is around. This is just like the only energy that I want in my space, and if there is not this in my space, I don't have time or energy for it anymore. I don't have time to entertain these dark forces or entertain anything that is not love. And love is something that is felt. It's a frequency. It's a vibration. It's not something that is said. It's not something that comes out of the mind. It's not something that comes out of the ego. It's not necessarily something that comes out of the gut. It comes out of the heart. Love comes out of the heart. You know, and man, the heart wants what the heart wants. The heart wants justice, right? And if there isn't justice in a situation, especially when it comes to love, maybe we should meditate on what would bring those two energies, or what could bring those two energies together in the next one. Maybe I'll do a reading on love. I don't want to do the generic love thing, but I have to. I'm being called to it. No, love is perfect. We'll talk about love next time. I have a lot of thoughts on love. I feel better talking about women. Women across the board got really hard. And I think in subtle language towards women, if there's any words being used, like women shouldn't have power, women shouldn't do this, or women no, or whatever, and then you're denying your own feminine qualities, right? Then you're polarizing yourself and you're throwing things out of balance. If you can't clearly see things from both perspectives and be neutral from these situations, then it might be best not to speak about it on a collective level, or to try to educate, or to turn people into, or try to push people into one specific way or another. You can't change somebody or force somebody to learn something. You know, you can't make a horse drink water. You can lead it to water, but you can't make it drink, right? Same thing with people. So we lead by example, doing our own transformative work, doing our own whatever, working through our own stuff. Don't put your shit on other people. Take accountability for your actions and your emotions. we'll talk more about accountability and all that stuff too. I don't know, whatever comes out. Maybe we'll do one tomorrow if I get the time. Make the time. I'm working on it. It seems like every time I prepare myself to do this, or every time whatever, there's just something that happens, or something that's trying to like prevent me from talking, or prevent these messages from coming out. So I'm working through that, and I'm dealing with that stuff too, and doing my own clearing work and whatnot. So if you're into this space and you like this channel and you want to stick with me here, I don't know. Let's just get it all clear, and then we'll keep moving forward. Bye.